All right, so today we're looking into Bill C-22, and I'll have to be honest with you guys, this bill is one of the more insane, I don't know if insane is the right word, but really invasive, because compared this to say TikTok's earlier controversy, especially in the US, and if you look at stuff like Discord's age verification, this one might take the cake, because while age verification is never fun for anybody and it's generally not very helpful, and also there's been like leaks and stuff when it comes to that, this one they don't even have to try. And so in essence what it is, it's basically if you have a messaging service such as WhatsApp or Telegram, whatever, the police or law enforcement could just take a look into it and be like, oh, we can just see whatever's in here. And so basically gives them a tool to do that. Now, it's not in effect right now because it was proposed earlier this year and bills take quite a lot of time. So there's also time to vote against it. So yeah, that's basically what it is. So if you just need a summary, that's where we are now. But for the rest of you guys, we're gonna take a bit of a deeper dive because oh my, it's way worse than me thought. So backgrounder here from the government of Canada, which they were so generous to give, thankfully, even though they're obligated by law to do that. But anyways, so from street crime to national security threats, criminal activity is increasingly being enabled by digital, globalized, and sophisticated crime networks. The government of Canada has introduced an act that will keep Canadians safe. Informed by extensive consultations, the bill would strengthen Canada's laws and support law enforcement with new tools to investigate serious threats, disrupt organized crime, and protect our communities. So, yeah, that's exactly what it's looking to do. And of course, there's some clarification that we gotta definitely look at. So, look at these new investigative tools. So now, let's look at it now. Oversight and privacy. So the Act proposes new tools to address the Supreme Court of Canada decisions in R.V. Spencer and R.V. Bykovets that obtaining basic information requires lawful authority. The proposed tools would require that police explain how the information they seek relates to a crime, whether the information will help the investigation. So let's see what kind of tools they're asking for. So in here it says, law enforcement has been clear. They need better tools to disrupt and combat crime in the digital age. At the same time, we need to make sure that Canadians' privacy is protected. The Act would help law enforcement investigate threats earlier, act quickly in urgent situations, and confirm whether someone is using a service relevant to an investigation so they can take the lawful steps needed to protect the victims and respond to imminent threats. Two new tools. The confirmation of service demand and the subscriber information production order address long-standing gaps in the investigative toolkit. These two new tools would not enable law enforcement to conduct warrantless searches of personal information. Oh yeah, so it's quite a bit to take in. And remember, guys, currently the way most information is done is you have to make a request or like a request from a court order, like, oh, we need these messages like now. And so the provider gives you that, and then of course through a lengthy process you finally get it. And because most of them actually keep your messages, they can easily help with law enforcement in that aspect. So that's this right now. But of course, as you guys know, investigations take a very long time to get done. And even if you get evidence faster, doesn't mean your case is going to go much faster. Sometimes there's other complications that happen. So as it is right now, that's how it goes. But you can actually see here what the current law and the proposed amendments are saying. And so let's ask ourselves, how does this apply to privacy? So according to the current law, it says here, law enforcement must rely on voluntary confirmation from service providers. If service providers do not voluntarily provide the information, the only recourse law enforcement agencies have is to seek a court order to obtain this confirmation. Without knowing whether a service provider has information in its possession, this may not be possible. And that's kind of what happens most of the time. So here is the new version that they're saying. To create a specific tool that provides a lawful authority to make a confirmation of service demand to allow police to determine if a service provider may have information that will assist in the investigation of an offense. Once the police have confirmation that the service provider may have information, they can then take the necessary investigative steps, including applying to a court to obtain a production order for the information into possession of the service provider. So essentially, if Rick, Tom, and Jerry want to say, hey, we think this person's being, a criminal, we could just have a tool that just tells us, hey, we can just do that. And so what happens to people who are like falsely accused? Like that's a really big one. And so when that happens, well, you see, he said he wanted to, shoot up the school. So let's just go and arrest him anyway, because we believe it is. Let him know he's just chatting with the boys in a group chat. So that's a big problem. So, and even then, if this tool is even implemented, sure, maybe some small time criminals may be caught, but the smarter ones are not going to use that. So that doesn't make a lot of sense. Even an example here, this says here, the confirmation of a service demand would allow police to determine if a phone number associated with a fraud offense is serviced by a Canadian telecommunications company. If the company confirms that yes, they service the number, police can seek a production order from a judge for the company to identify the user owner of the number, which is kind of strange. And even then, when you're trying to get this kind of information, there's usually other surrounding evidence that you need. So just having a number is not really enough. So that's why that doesn't make a lot of sense. Like, it doesn't sound that bad, but it's actually not that great. So this is why, like, this is why. And even then, outside of, like, just like I said, false accusations and stuff, your average person is going to be, especially not paying attention. They might be more paranoid. They might migrate to other stuff, and services might go down. And it's just a whole ripple effect. We haven't even gotten to the fact that there's applications that don't even like to do this stuff. But let's go to our clarifications. So now, clarification. So the Act proposes several clarifications to current laws to make sure that they are aligned with today's realities of criminal investigations. So this one says here, accepting receipt of voluntary disclosure that is provided to law enforcement. And so, under the current law here, it says law enforcement officials face challenges regarding their authority to process information that is voluntarily given to them without prior court authorization. And so, the proposed amendments are clarify that law enforcement officials are not required to obtain court approval to accept information that is given to them voluntarily. And so, that's not great either, because say, for example, like you want to give stuff away, and it's like, oh, the court serves as that middle ground. So be like, okay, well, we've seen your case. We can say, go ahead. But if they don't need that, that's not exactly great. Because remember, in due process, like there's a lot of steps into it, and I'm not a lawyer, so I can't tell you all the steps. But regardless, there's a way of things that are done. And so that way it's done in the most fair ways. And of course, there's also a chance to abuse that. So if the court's not giving people the order to say, hey, you can go for it, it's like, it's not very fun. And even like cop shows and stuff, when someone's trying to investigate like a house, what do they always ask? Do you have a warrant? Okay. So you need evidence that there's been criminal practices. That's what the warrant's for. And that's your official approval. Because if you just break into a house and investigate, I believe that's an unlawful search, which doesn't end well, and that also, lets the criminal get away. So this law right here is trying to bypass all of that. So not great. And so now another one, it says it's accepting information that must be law by provided to the law enforcement. So the current law says law enforcement does not have a clear ability to process information that must be provided to them by law without going to court to obtain approval. And proposed amendments says here, clarify that law enforcement officials are not required to obtain court approval to accept this information. So like I said, Tom, Ben, and Jerry can literally just go and go into your stuff without even allowing you to do that, which is kind of... Sorry, quick editor's note here. I do want to add about the subscriber information production order. In essence, what it just does is that information that is usually held on certain services that the court would need, for instance, from a court order, those take time. They have to go make copies and stuff and then give it to the people or give it to the police or relevant authorities. This one here in this order says that, oh, this is another way to just bypass it without the court order because it's trying to expedite an investigation. But this is also at the cost of privacy, which is not a great thing. So that's something I should have mentioned earlier, but I'm just going to put it in right here before we segue to our next section. So back to the video. Now, you might be wondering, what if I use different applications that are a bit more privacy focused? So, for example, you have something like Signal. So, the thing with Signal is that it's fully end-to-end encrypted, so they don't actually access your messages or any of your attachments. And you have to go and request your data yourself if you want to use it or you want to see it. And so, in a court order, you have to be requested to go do that and go through the whole process yourself, which could be a bit disastrous because, maybe delete messages or something. Who knows? But this is still a problem because, for instance, if it's banned in Canada, that's a huge potential user base that's not being utilized. And on top of that, if it was to comply with this bill, they literally have to write their application from the ground up because the way it was designed, I'm assuming, I don't have the code for it at the moment, but it'd be like, okay, well, this is made with end-to-end encryption in mind, so we want this to be stayed within that barrier. So they're not going to do that. So it's either probably get banned or something along those lines. And it's not the first time this happened in Canada either. I want to point you guys to something like Bill C-18. And so Bill C-18 says here, it would enact the Online News Act, so which proposes a regime to regulate digital platforms that act as intermediaries in Canada's news media ecosystem in order to enhance fairness in the digital news market. The bill introduces a new bargaining framework intended to support news businesses to secure fair compensation when their news content is made available by dominant digital news intermediaries and generate economic gain. In layman's terms, if you post on Google, you got to pay us a certain amount for us to post our news on Google. But the open internet doesn't really work like that in some areas. And so you actually take a look right now. If you try to look up, say for example, CTV News in Canada on Facebook, you can't access it because, they kind of don't want to do that. And I believe with Google, they also reached a deal. So that's kind of where we're at now. So what does it all mean? Basically, Canadian news is already kind of controlled as it is. And so this is another emphasis of having more control put on top of people, which is not exactly warranted. So that's a big no-no. We don't want to be controlled anymore. That kind of stuff. And so if Big C-22 goes through, that could prove even more disastrous. You're literally, ironically, living under Big Brother. Brother Eye is Batman. Actually, Brother Eyes kind of applies to, actually. But regardless, you're basically stuck in a surveillance state 24/7, which you don't want to be. And that could prove disastrous for a lot of people. Because people who are, don't feel as safe, they don't perform in the best way possible. But you'll be asking, okay, so in the event that authorities are having a hard time, is there ways that they have caught people in the past, maybe? So allow me to introduce you to honeypots, because honeypots are actually very infamous. So if you're unaware of what a honeypot is, essentially, a good way to put it is that, like sting operations and like pred catches. So instead of having a real place to do it, you have a cyber environment to do it, and you have a website that provides a service, and people just go on there and they do that. Because remember, in stuff like pred catches, the people have to be very willing. You have to show evidence that they're initiating conversation. They're the ones doing it. Because if you lure them, that could lead to entrapment and no conviction. So that's where it is. But one of the most infamous honeypots that actually happened was Operation Trojan Shield. So this was basically a collaboration by many law enforcement agencies. And so what they did is they set up a messaging app called Anom. And so this was used by criminals and provide particular communication so that they could say, hey, you want to sell this bag of weed at 6 p.m.? The weed's legal now, but either way, 6 p.m.? Okay, I'll take that. But there's actually a Trojan horse inside of it. And guess what? That got them to monitor all the communications, and it led to over 800 arrests. So that's pretty big in 16 countries. So stuff like that exists. There is methods to doing this. And there's so many different cases of this stuff happening where criminals will walk right into it. And the key thing is, if you want to catch a criminal, you have to think like a criminal. So a criminal's going to go, oh, I want to go to a safe space. Oh, this is a safe space. Let me just go over here and let me go and do my stuff. And so if that service is provided, they'll go to it. And so when you broadcast a law such as this, they're just going to get smart and say, oh, now they can look at my messages in the law. That means I have to go somewhere else. So to me, it's not really helping anybody. And so you might be asking yourself, how do I, if I'm in Canada, and this bill passes, how could I fight it? Well, honestly, the first thing you do, of course, is you can vote. Voting is your democratic right. But another thing you can do is, what I'm seeing online, I've seen different things and stuff like that I'm implementing, is I'm starting to host my own stuff from now. And of course, migrating to apps such as Signal, because Signal's not banned at the moment. So that's a big thing. And even then, when it comes down to stuff like WhatsApp, I use it mostly just for family stuff. I don't use WhatsApp all the time. I just use it to contact some people who don't want to migrate to other apps, which is not fun for me, but either way. So yeah, if you want to be more private, you got to take it into your own hands. So yeah, but I haven't really seen the online, at least not, I haven't seen the online pushback against this too much. But I would imagine that most people who actually took a look into this are not very happy. And remember, bills take quite a while to be put into effect. So means you have ample time to prepare yourself against this kind of stuff. But to me, we're just moving towards more of a social, social, like more like a surveillance state at this point. And it's not just in here that it could affect. If it gets passed in here, that means other places are going to start pushing it. Because mind you, this kind of stuff is really getting ramped up because of stuff like Online Safety Act getting passed. And that leads to more extreme stuff, like such as VPNs getting banned. So this getting passed is not a good idea. Not for anybody. Which is not what we want. But anyways, that's it for me today, because it's quite a bit. But guys, really try your best to protect your own online safety. And even I need to start taking even more of a conscious effort to doing stuff. So that being said, maybe in the future I'll do a video of like making my own search engine or something, self-hosting certain thing, because I already host stuff like local models. So maybe in the future it's a bit different. But anyways, if you enjoyed this video, make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and follow my social in the description below. But that's it today. Stay safe, guys.